Good day, Academics 2A students. Today we are going to be focusing on Chapter 7, Tutorial 6 worksheet. I will be explaining certain concepts that were in your Tutorial 6 worksheet. Please do check out part 2 of this video to actually explain the further explanations of the graphs that were included in your tutorial, because in this tutorial, in this part of the video, we're going to be explaining certain concepts, right? Without further ado, let's get on into question 1. Question 1 reads as follows. Based on the labor market issues, discuss the following concepts. The first concept is the natural rate of unemployment. What is the natural rate of unemployment? There are two definitions you can use when it comes to the natural rate of unemployment. And the first definition is when we say that the equilibrium, the natural rate of unemployment is the equilibrium unemployment rate, right? It is when the unemployment rate such that the real wage is chosen in which setting is equal to the real wage implied by the price setting. That is the first definition you can use. Or you can use the definition where we are saying that the unemployment rate is when the labor market is in equilibrium, when the economy is in full employment. It only includes frictional and structural unemployment and not the cyclical unemployment, right? So this is how we'll put it. So it's either we use this first definition, which is the natural rate of unemployment is the equilibrium unemployment rate. It is the unemployment rate such that the real wage is chosen in wage setting is equal to the real wage implied by the price setting. Or we can use this definition where we are saying it's the unemployment rate where the labor market is in equilibrium when the economy is in its full employment. It only includes frictional and structural unemployment and not the cyclical unemployment. And then we move on to B, where we are asked to give the difference between broad and narrow unemployment, right? So we need to understand firstly what is narrow unemployment and what is broad unemployment. Then we find what the difference is between the two definitions, right? So what is broad unemployment, as it is the first word? So we define broad unemployment as we define it as people who are within the economically active group people who are willing and able to work and are actively seeking for a job but are unable to find one. It also includes discouraged job seekers, right? So this is the broad definition of unemployment, right? So the broad regards all of those without a job who are available to work and who are available for work as unemployed, even with no attempt to look for a job. That is how we define the broad broad unemployment. And then when it comes to the narrow unemployment, this is defined as people who are within the economically active population who are willing and able to work and are actively seeking jobs but are unable to find one. right? So the narrow unemployment rate refers to the people who are unemployed and are actively seeking for work. So what is then the difference between the broad unemployment and the narrow unemployment? Broad unemployment includes discouraged workers. It includes discouraged workers, and that's something that narrow unemployment doesn't include. Sorry, I'm trying to highlight the answers for you so you guys can see properly. Yes, so broad unemployment, when we define broad unemployment, we include the discouraged job seekers, and when we define narrow unemployment, we don't include discouraged job seekers, right? So moving on to the definition of discouraged workers, how do we define discouraged workers? Discouraged workers may be considered, out of the labor force. They are no longer actively seeking unemployment, but they would take a job if offered one, or if they found one. So these are the people of legal employment age who are not actively seeking for employment, but however, if they are offered a job, they would take it. This is how we would define discouraged workers. They are not looking, or they gave up on looking, but if they were given a job, they would actually take it. And how would we then define bargaining power, right? What is bargaining power? Bargaining power depends on how costly it is for a firm to replace the worker, right? The second is how hard it would be for a worker to find another job after leaving the firm. The more the costly it is for a worker to replace a worker, it is easier for the worker to find another job. It's ultimately the more bargaining power a worker will have. So how would essentially define bargaining power? This is the relative power of parties in a situation to exert influence over the other party, right? So this is how we would define bargaining power. This is the relative power of parties in a situation to exert influence over each other. It depends on how costly it would be for a firm to replace a worker. It also, it's also on how hard it would be for the worker, to find another job after leaving the firm. And this is how we would define the bargaining power. So essentially, it is the relative power either the firm or the worker has to exert influence over the other, right? So if we're talking about the bargaining power the firm has, it's the bargaining power the firm has to influence or exert influence towards the workers or vice versa, right? So question 2 reads as follows. Explain using your own words how the low unemployment change. How does the low unemployment change the relative bargaining power of firms and workers? And what effect will this have on real wage, right? So this is what we'll say, right? So when the unemployment rate is low, the bargaining power of workers will be stronger. Because they're the ones who have more power in the situation, and the bargaining power of workers is strong and the bargaining power of firms is weak, right? This means that it is more difficult for firms to find acceptable replacement workers. At the same time, it is easier for workers to find other jobs. Under these conditions, workers may be able to obtain a higher wage, right? So we are saying that the low unemployment strengthens the workers' bargaining power, right? So workers have a choice whether they want to stay in a job or they want to leave a certain job because they have a stronger bargaining power. And firms then have a lower bargaining power because now it is more difficult for them to find other workers. Now they don't have influence, or they can't exert influence over the workers. At this point, workers have a higher bargaining power. So then how you would then answer this question is you would say that when the unemployment rate is low, the bargaining power workers have is strong and the bargaining power firms have is weak. It is more difficult for firms to find acceptable replacement workers. At the same time, it is easier for workers to find other jobs. Under those conditions, workers may be able to obtain a higher wage. This is because they have a higher bargaining power. So today we've explained the natural rates of unemployment. We've explained the broad versus the narrow definition of unemployment. We have explained the definition of discouraged workers, the bargaining power, and we've explained what happens when we have a low unemployment rate, what happens to the bargaining power of firms and workers. If you still don't understand this definition and how it will affect the real wages and so on, please feel free to consult with your tutors. Otherwise, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching the video till the end.